Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice, as I have a new desk, a round of desk. Actually, it's only one replacement. No, maybe two. We have Maynard, we have Rotterdam, and we have the Muslim gentlemen. Together, we are going to deliberate and think about the next match coming up. It's going to be soO versus Hurricane, and this is a qualifying match to determine who moves on into the round of 24. Maynard, give me the stuff.
The stuff, James?
The stuff.
All right, well, we'll keep it PG. soO is someone who I actually picked pretty early on to be someone that would come through in this bracket. He's looking incredibly good at the moment in the, the online tournaments like Alima League and also in GSL, looking very, very solid as well. Hurricane, also on the up and up, but I feel like soO is still favored here. He's just been looking a little bit more impressive, a little bit more convincing in a lot of those online tournaments. Hurricane usually has a tendency to bow out early. So it's an impressive showing. Clearly he's got the skills to play the bills, but...
That's what I love about Maynard, He could have gone for some of the top dogs, like a Space Marine or a Crow or Minato.
Or
Bassior in his bracket. But he's like, no, guys, I went out on a loop here, okay? I put my credibility on the line.
A huge risk.
But
I was very foolish.
I honestly believe that soO, the guy that made it to like 74 GSL finals, could potentially make it out of this bracket. I like that, Maynard.
It's a tough one, It's very, very hard.
Someone's got to do it.
You got to do it. I will jump on this grenade, Rotterdam.
I respect that choice.
I'll save you all from this grenade, okay?
I don't know if it would ever come true. I mean, you're really going out on a limb here, but I respect it, Maynard.
And if we talk about Hurricane as well, he's a guy that not even remotely as famous as soO. soO coming second at BlizzCon to Rogue, second place everywhere, all the GSLs, you name it. But Hurricane, he's roughly 6.8K or so on the career ladder and has been for a little while now. I always hear the foreigners talk about him because he spends time in the foreigner house. They all say he's a really nice guy, but also really good. And a lot of these practice monsters, you tend to find that all it takes is one moment of confidence for it really all to sink in. And the fact that he's so far, and he beat Gumiho 2-0 to get to here, he's obviously looking sharp.
Definitely so. Rotterdam, your thoughts on Hurricane as a player coming into this series?
A little bit of a mystery for me. He's one of those Protoss players that I see a lot less from. I mean, obviously, if you spend time in the house that No Regret is running together with some of the Root guys over in Korea, I'm sure that they know a lot more. For us in Europe, it's actually kind of hard to really be incredibly up-to-date. So I'd be lying if I said I'm expecting this or that. I'm just going to sit back and make my first real opinion. Obviously, we've only seen Parting and Raynor so far on the mainstream. We saw Parting versus Strul. These are going to be the very first things I see of Hurricane in this tournament. I absolutely do believe that he's an underdog here. It's crazy, I know, soO, this guy that Maynard is predicted to make it out.
This no-name Zerg player, soO,
But I'd love to see Hurricane prove us wrong. It should be a really fun series. It's a good series. And I think we're going to see a lot more from both these guys in this tournament.
All right, gents. Well, it's time to go to our commentary team here. This is our first qualifying match of the day to find out who moves into the round of 24. Let's go.
That's a little bit sad. He just never walks over when you're here, Jeff.
Yeah, I know. Not trying to take too much offense.
That's cool.
I think a little bit less disappointing than that is that professional commentator Rotterdam knows nothing about the professional StarCraft II Protoss player Hurricane. And for me, when I think of great minds of Protoss, I think of Todd. I think of Falcon Paladin. I think of M. Canning. I want to say Roddy. But he's making it so hard for me because I'm like, Hurricane? Me and all of Twitch chat have been watching him for 7 years. And this guy is way up there right now. If you're not watching Hurricane, what are you, a Cyril fan? You sick freak? Get out of your closet. This kid's about to smash soO. soO's 2017, soO was all the rage. Now, get out of here, dude. It's not even about soO anymore.
To play devil's advocate there for Roddy, you only have so much space in your brain, and for him, at least 60% of his mental storage is taken up on Goblin strategies and his rise to fame, which we're going to see later on this year. But here, right now, it's soO versus Hurricane. And it's going to be a good one. I personally haven't seen too much of Hurricane. I actually watched quite a lot of his online series last year.
Can I ask you a question?
But it's been about 6 months.
When you said it's soO versus Hurricane, did you expect them to go in the game?
Kind of, yeah.
You're kind of hoping for that?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I like things to sync up nicely, but it never happens.
It doesn't happen that way.
No.
All right. Well, here we are. In the top left-hand side of Year 0, it's your IEM Katowice 2019 champion, Hurricane.
Hurricane. He's looking focused. He's had a lot of international experience over the years, slowly racking up. But this man over here is no stranger to the big stage. In the red, it is soO. No stranger, of course, to grand finals.
No.
But not very many trophies in his career. A lot of second places.
I know. The poor guy, too. Like, it's one of those things where it is actually true, and it's our job to bring that up and everything, but I feel so bad because he's so nice about it every time, right? Like, people straight up in interviews. I remember at BlizzCon, they're like, oh, what if he takes second again? He's like, I will be mortified. I'm trying not to do that. Like, I just want to win. And they're like, okay, well, that's our question for you. He's so good. I mean, that's the other thing, too, is like in StarCraft, we underrate that, right? We were like, how can you not even win a championship? The guy's in the finals of so many big tournaments against the best in the world. I mean, it's actually weird that he hasn't won more.
It really is. He's such a monster, especially in the early to mid game. One of the most decisive players. You know, we talk about players being aggressive. With soO, it's like it's an overwhelming mid-game aggression most of the time. He can mix in his cheeses, but he's got this very kind of large range of plays. And at some point in the mid-game, he kind of just says, and I am going to swamp you with Zerg. And we don't see a lot of Zerg players who necessarily just overwhelm their opponents, but soO is the most decisive engagement taker. A lot of players, they look for the perfect engagement, but soO will look at an engagement and say, this isn't perfect, but it will win. I know it will still be enough to just crash through, get the advantage, and go from there. And he very rarely blinks when he's looking down the face of a kind of, is this the right way to go? He just charges. So he doesn't second guess himself. Occasionally that leads to him taking disastrous fights where he just goes into what seems like the silliest engagement ever. But it's that same confidence which allows him to take advantage of situations where other players would back off.
Yep. We saw a little bit of that in the PvPs yesterday too, where some of these Protoss players have that dynamic to their gameplay as well, where they just run up a ramp, go into a fight. And it seems crazy, but it is, again, that kind of hunter's instinct, that killer instinct, if you will, that gets them to the place where they're playing against these other world-class players for big prizes pools and chunks of money. So you live and you die by that sword in this case. But on this big map here to start off this best of three, soO is going to comfortably be able to go up to 3 bases, have a little bit of a dance. And this is one thing that it's been funny. You know, we look to tournaments like this to kind of find the meta of PvZ or all the matchups, really. The Stargate has been, up until this tournament, I would have told you have to go Stargate PvZ, but because of this Nidus meta, I feel we're seeing a lot more Robo and Twilight Council openings. But here we are with the Stargate again.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see it just getting so popular, the Robo and the Twilight. Like, it was starting to gain a little bit of momentum. Of course, it is just everywhere right now. This tournament we've seen so much. This Adept getting cornered. soO with a good job shepherding that out. But it sees there's no lair, and that's important. Why does the Adept spend so long in there every single game at the moment? You've got to kind of check what's going on. And of course, he clicked on the gas. He saw gas hadn't been continued to be mining. He says there's no chance of a Nidus Worm popping up in my base at the 4-minute 10 mark. If the lair goes down immediately after the first Queen pops, the Protoss player has to basically just base their entire build order around stopping that potential outcome.
Yep, gets a little bit crazy there. But in this case, we're just going to see some map control from soO. Obviously, no Overlords on the Protoss side of the map, as a Phoenix was the first thing off that Stargate. That would just be kind of more fuel to the fire, if you will. But comfortably going to see the mid-map. That's what that tower allows for. And then Ling's kind of perusing around to make sure there's nothing else setting up and getting weird. Hurricane is a player, you know, joking aside, I was giving Roddy crap, and of course, if you guys aren't familiar, that's just my job. I just tease. Kevin's very, very knowledgeable about all things StarCraft, of course. But Hurricane is a player that flies a little bit under the radar, but he has some surprising like GSL results, and then people go, no. I've been watching him in the Alimo League or some of these events, and he's actually getting some sick results. And I'll tell you what, I became an Insta fan watching his match against Gumio, which again, I encourage people to go back and check out. And hopefully he can showcase what I was seeing over there here, because if he's playing at that level, anything is possible. And you're seeing that from soO, right? Like soO's checking for this fast third nexus, spots it immediately. But it could be a timing attack. It could be some weird Stargate play. A player like Hurricane can do it all.
And it is an interesting transition, quite a quick third. Just a single Oracle, a Sentry. Oh, actually, sorry, there was the second Oracle as well. But it's Robo Twilight Forge after that third base. So we're not seeing a Glaive Adept. We're not seeing the Archon drop. It's just kind of, here's a third, let's go to the next stage of the game. So he's going to no doubt be going probably Charge Lot Archon Immortal. He's just going to add on all the tech, be very defensive. And he did get an early 3 gateways, which gives him the ability to make a lot of Zealots, Sentries we see being added in here. These are all things which help you just have more material on the ground. A lack of material, that's what's been costing these Protoss players their games, when we see these kind of surprise attacks hitting them and they're like, well, I've got 3 Sentries, an Immortal, an Oracle, and a Phoenix. Having 3 gateways up early is going to give Hurricane a bit more stability.
Yeah, and we've seen double Robo kind of dominate the meta for a while there as well, but to your point, one of the weak spots in that production cycle is double Robo, followed by the Gateway Explosion, and sometimes things can fit right in there, namely the Nidus. But in this case, it's going to be a Spire, so I actually like the positioning for Hurricane quite well. As long as he gets that information through those units, like the Oracles or something along those lines, and figures out what's coming his way fairly soon, he should be well equipped. But as our wonderful observer is pointing out here, it is not an all-in on that Spire, right? Like, you can develop, and it is going to get scouted there by that Phoenix.
Yeah.
But it's one of those crazy things for the Protoss where you're like, oh no! So I'll start making Phoenix off my double Stargate, but then all of a sudden maxed Roaches show up, and if you didn't emphasize ground forces, you could just die right out there.
Absolutely. Seeing it so early is fantastic. We're seeing melee start up. 24 Zerglings, a Baneley Nest, and a Hydra Den. It's going to be a swap into Hydra Bane. Yeah, I was about to say, because soO was kind of hemming and hawing just a little bit there, I was like, is he still going to commit to the Mutas? Maybe, like 8 Mutas, but I'm pretty sure he's just going to go straight into Hydra Bane. Like, I would not be surprised if he just lets the Spire finish, doesn't use it at all, and just says, hey, you've got to be worried about Mutalisk switches this entire game. You're going to build a few Phoenixes, you're going to build a few cannons in your mineral lines, maybe some shield batteries, and indeed, 3 Mutalisks are queued up. They are going to help get rid of this very delayed Archon drop coming in. Hurricane just wanting a bit of aggressive scouting, and hey, a couple of drone kills, he'll take it.
This off-timing stuff is so strong as well, because it's kind of it's a fill-me-out too, right? Like, if you were just greedily going towards Mutas, 2 Archons and a bunch of Zealots can do some serious damage, but as it is, there are Lings out there.
Oh, those drones stacking up. 3 of them do go down, the rest escape though. The Archons not engaging at the same time as the Zealots, and that's going to be a problem. Good transfuse there. Recall goes down, 1 Archon dies just before it gets out of there.
Still good damage though, and does just see the 3 Mutas. Now, the weird thing about seeing the Mutas at that time as well is it could be believable, right? Like, maybe that was the first 3 of the 9 coming out behind that. The Protoss didn't stick around that long. So if I'm looking at that production tab, I'm still seeing more Phoenix coming out. It's not a full all-out commitment, but the longer that it goes without seeing the Hydra tech, this could become a pretty big issue.
Yeah, especially if there's no Immortals in there, and that's really what's being skipped here, is those Immortals and the kind of meat in the army. We've only got 1 Robo, and we can see a slight supply block here delaying that Immortal production, but also the 4th base. That's what Hurricane wants to do. Normally, we're looking at a Storm Immortal Archon up against Hydra Bane. It's getting that 4th up nice and early, cementing it, getting some kind of cannons and shield batteries, some Storm on different sides, and at least now Hurricane has that knowledge of what's going on, is going to lose these Oracles, but another 5 worker kills. I mean, it's not really even a dent, it's a scratch in the 80 workers that are still remaining for soO, that at least he knows, okay, you're going up for the big macro game, and that's where the players start thinking a few minutes ahead. Hurricane is thinking, I need that 4th up right now, because not only is Hydra Bane scary, but it's the next step. It's the Broodlords afterwards. I need to be able to get up to Tempest or something, or hit a timing attack before those Broodlords come out. He knows soO maybe kind of his tech's a little bit behind, with like the Banes and Hydras being delayed after Mutas, but soO has a gigantic economy.
Yeah, and to segue off your point too, and this is something you were talking about soO earlier, I'm loving just how he's manipulating the tech, right? Like, by the time he discovers he's facing Hydra, that's when the 4th base for the Protoss players is going down, but also the tech is starting to adjust for that composition. Well, hey, that's when soO's going to actually switch over into Broodlords and kind of the Hive tech. So he's always kind of remaining 1 step ahead, or at least he's trying to do that on some semblance. We did see the Warp Prism get picked off right there. Some creep being fought back by Hurricane, but I do have to say, Hurricane, well, having a little bit of a tough time, right? Like, you were talking about the supply block. He's behind in the scouting just a little bit. He seems to be playing catch-up with soO. And soO's just kind of being like the marionette player above him, just kind of like making him dance here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, supplies still look totally okay for Hurricane, and his upgrades are good. He's got +2, and +2 melee. We'll be matching that soon. What's interesting is he's going for Blink. So Blink is a good counter to Broodlords in small numbers, right? You can deal with 5, 6, 7, even sometimes 8 Broodlords by blinking on them. But as the numbers get higher and higher, that gets more and more difficult to orchestrate. So Hurricane's still just trying to set up for the next stage of the game. You can see a lot of Immortals and Archons being added in. And the question I'm asking myself is, does he try to really force the issue? He lost a Warp Prism, which was actually huge.
Top of the map, I think those are all Banelings. They are, just before speed too. And the guy, mostly for like, what, 2 or 3 Zealots?
Couple Zealots, yeah, no worries. I mean, Zealots are basically free for the Protoss players, so this map is so huge though, and there's really not that many flanks down the edges, right? It's just the north and the south. With no Warp Prism, I don't think there's anything set up on the Zerg side. I feel like soO is just absolutely safe right now.
He's safe, but his harassment and what he wants to get done with this army is getting caught. It's just getting caught by these Zealots. They're just kind of meandering around the map. So great scouting out from Hurricane. But to your point, yes, he's safe, and also he is developing that Broodlord tech. And so far, by bowling around the middle of the map, Hurricane's not really picking up on this switch that's coming up. Now, for Protoss, you know Broodlords are always kind of coming. It's just a matter of when. but it's still good to know exactly when to face that composition.
The fleet beacon's only just starting, so I don't know if Tempest are really going to be out on time, if that is indeed how he wants to answer this. He might just be kind of stepping up and preparing for a few minutes from now. As I said, Blinkstalkers can deal with Broodlords. That changeling, seeing everything there. Very nice. Yeah, 2 more Stargates. So it's going to be 3 Stargate transition. A Warp Prism is on the way. Hurricane's
really
got
quick.
a lot of Storm. Yeah, they definitely do in the new patch, right? They're a bit more maneuverable. They're a little bit easier to kill, but hey, they shoot from 2 screens away, so not the biggest deal.
The other part of it too is you don't need 12 Tempests to answer for Broodlords. You want, 5, 6. Of course, more the merrier, but at the same time, what I'm saying is your answer for that tech really starts with 4 or 5 Tempests. You'll get to that pretty quick, so I think his timing is actually pretty okay. He's going to look to maybe shave off some of these extra units. You see Zealots penetrating deep into the base here, but also some Phoenix probably separating out to go sacrifice themselves.
Zealot Archon on the north was trying to find a way in, but he's actually pulled back a few of the Archons, and he's just going to go in with a few Zealots on that north base, but it's kind of hitting, goes in on the south, gets caught, goes in on the north, gets caught. Army on the south now finally starting to push into the creep. Warp Prism in the main is going to set up. There we go. Hurricane finally saying, okay, let's do something before these Broodlords come and take the fight to me. And that Zealot Warpin is going to start to cause some problems on the south side. soO flanking in on that army. That's a small army.
Yep.
It does not look that big. He's left a few High Templar out in the open as well.
He kind of instantly recall out of here, and he is losing key units. The double Archons get picked off as well.
Lots of drones going down in the main at the same time, though. Another Zealot Warpin. Ooh.
Yep, and these Lings will find the Templar. It's going to be a little bit expensive. In fact, one might even get its life saved. It does.
Wow.
But the Broodlords are going to answer for the Zealots inside the main. Now, the good news here, again, for Hurricane, is that he gets to see, oh, okay, you're not just, you're actually heavily investing into that Broodlord tech. I was not being tricked or bamboozled here or anything like that, or any word I want to make up at that time. So the Tempest is the right call. He's going well into a tech that will be served here.
Come back here. Come back here. The Warp Prism going down, nice pick up there. We're seeing a couple Tempests and already Void Rays starting up, so I was wondering that. It's always a bit awkward in these late game scenarios. At the moment, the common consensus is Zerg is favored versus the Protoss in the ultra late game. Mass Infestor has looked really beautiful. A couple of Vipers doing abducts, mostly though Neuroparasite, Fungal Growth locking down Interceptors, locking down armies. All this sort of stuff's been amazing, but this is not a normal Zerg. This is soO. soO is a mid-game master. He's not a big fan of spellcasters. He likes these big attacking armies, and he wants to take the fight to Hurricane before Hurricane gets to that fancy late-game army. soO is going to look to break him right here, right now. Nice Storm, nice Archon zoning out the Corruptors, but the Corruptors want those snipes on the Tempests.
What's fun for Hurricane here, though, is he does not need that base, right? It was being warped in, so he can kind of back up, he can kite, get some damage done. Oh, the Mothership, though, is isolating itself. A little bit of a sloppy rally there, just dies for free. It's going to try to recall it, but that's no good. And
the
now
Tempest
there's
exposed.
an insignificant amount of Tempest. There's not that many Archons.
Yeah.
There's no Stalkers to blink. This is a bad fight for Hurricane.
The Banelings on the south side actually cleared out 20 workers in the middle of this. That distracted Hurricane. His Tempest and Mothership rally got caught. And soO's decisiveness just jumping on this. Hurricane was not quite prepared. soO, as I said earlier, he's so decisive at these engagements. He never second guesses. He knows his window. He knows his timing. And he jumps in. Every single small mistake from Hurricane gets punished. And that's going to be a big, big win for soO in game 1.
As Hurricane does tap out, soO will take that decisive fight, and with it the win. Nicely done there. Only 5 bases behind that. The creep spread not all over the map. You can kind of see soO's stamp of how he does things in this game. He's incredibly, in terms of fighting, he manipulated the tech orders between the 2 players. But he's not like a Scarlet where the entire map's covered in creep. He's not a Serral where the fights are perfectly orchestrated coming in from every angle.
Yeah.
He kind of does it his own way, and it's really fun to see his overall game plan. And he took down a player like Hurricane, who's playing some of the best Protoss I've seen at Katowice, at least. And he made him look bad. He made him look pretty easy there, I thought.
And soO has that ability. I mean, I often joke about how up until the grand finals where soO often falls, he makes his opponents look bad. I almost feel like a lot of fans get upset with soO because they see their favorite players made look silly. He does it to the best players in the world regularly. soO has this magical ability to every time he commits to one of those pushes, his opponent looks surprised.
Right.
They look like they can't believe, like, what, you're pushing in right now? You're eating these storms? Oh gosh, my Tempests are caught out. Oh, there's Banelings in my mineral line. You could kind of see Hurricane just wasn't quite ready. You were saying, oh, he can fall back from here. And absolutely he could, but it was like the Broodlords were already kind of chewing through the Archons. He was getting those units picked off on the top. I mean, if that Mothership and the extra Tempest were there, if he kind of fell back a little bit better, maybe still had one of the Oracles alive for the Revelation, because, you know, you want to be picking away at those Broodlords from afar. Things could have looked very different, but soO, decisive as ever, goes in, gets himself a nice clean game one.
Oh, I thought you hit the nail on the head too, and it's a hard job for our observers, so we'll forgive them for this. But like you said, Banelings detonated on a mineral line, killing 20-some-odd probes, and that's why things like a Mothership just walking right through all the Corruptors, but also other little things too, like Voiders were being added to that composition with how heavily he had Corruptors. If that army ever fully assembles, it can actually be a hot knife through butter against what soO had, but because it was dying in piecemeal, it ended up being a pretty bad army, as it were.
It's funny, isn't it? When you get that magic count of Void Rays, 5, 6 of them with prismatic alignment, suddenly it's a crew. But as it was just the dregs of a Protoss army. It wasn't quite together. Let's see if he can bring it back. Of course, this is a qualifying match here. The winner of this will be going through to the group stage. Up here in the top left-hand side, down 0-1 in the blue, it's Hurricane.
Gonna need to bring something more to this next one to take out this guy down here in the bottom right-hand side, seemingly always destined for the finals. It's the Red Zerg, soO. From the new team, Chivo Esports, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, it's, you know, soO's such a big name, a big history, and I think he wants to go a lot further here. This is a tournament where there's so many memories that are made because it is so many days of games. And once you get to that group stage, you immediately get at least 5 series there. You get that round robin, you get to play a lot of different players. And soO's the sort of player who I think is just good at that sort of tournament. He's good at this, just controlling the game, running away with it very quickly. And I'm curious to see if he's got a take on the Nidus Worm shenanigans these Zergs are pulling out. We've seen it on this map specifically with the kind of hitting the third, hitting the main base in the mid game. So that would be a strategy which just Mass Roach Hydra, Scarlet did it, a few others did it.
Rainer.
It's a good build.
Yeah, it seems like everybody. I mean, of course, the other funny question mark here will be our own Alpha Star, Serral. Is he going to start utilizing the Nidus, right? Because he's always got his own idea of what's the best thing to do, and it's not like, you know, there's no honor here. If the strategy seems overpowered or whatever, until it's patched or until maps kind of figure it out, or even just the way players play figure it out, these guys are going to do it. So Serral, if that's the best way to play, we'll see it.
Well, I mean, think about Serral, like his Zerg vs. Zerg last year, it was the burrowed roaches, which have been nerfed. They don't heal as fast anymore, but he always made it look like he was like, well, I can just bounce between 3 different angles, engaging and disengaging, and then you're going to allocate too many units here, and I'll attack there, and then I'll win. So I'm sure it's going to be magical. He's gonna show us some things later on in this tournament. That is for sure.
Good point, though. ZUZ specifically, right? Because it takes actual DPS to reduce that Nidus before it happens. Like a queen and 5 lings, they're not going to do it or whatever. It actually takes quite a bit more. So in a ZUZ, that can be really tough if you do hit like a main and a third base to stretch out the map that way. Oh. We are going to see a Stargate here from Hurricane again. Last time it was Phoenix first, followed by 2 Oracles. And one thing we didn't really touch on too much, you had mentioned it in the game, of course, but it's a big deal, by the way, when the Protoss loses both Oracles. It's a huge investment. A lot of people talk about it in terms of harass, but really the role that it's kind of found itself in is constant information and always keeping tabs. Now, one of the important things about soO's army in that last game, it was like 12 Hydras, and it never really went anywhere from there because he was just using that to make sure he didn't die to a Warp Prism or stuff in the middle of the map as he made his way to Broodlords. If a Protoss knows that, they can hit their own timing attack and force them to make units before the Broodlords show up.
Yeah, definitely could have been kind of rearing around the map a bit more. Of course, that was year 0. It's a very big map. It's kind of hard to get across there. We saw Recall being used constantly because Hurricane was afraid of getting trapped on the far side. Here on Port Alexander, we might see a lot more movement. I mean, I'm sure if it goes the same way as last game, we're going to see a lot more movement on both sides because you can just get to the other side, isolate a 4th base, that sort of thing. So very excited to see. Is Hurricane just confident in his standard play? It looks like it for now.
Yeah.
It's Adept. There's the Stalker, there's the Oracles, and Lair comes down quite quickly for soO in response.
I feel like that's a faster Lair, right? Like
yeah.
I know I've got a little bit of Nidus PTSD because every time a Lair happens, I'm like, it's going to be Nidus, but maybe it's going to be Nidus.
Does he not know that it's Stargate, actually? Because
he did not scout it.
Because I think he's seen the Stalker, and I think he might be thinking it's not a Stargate because there's no spores down.
No, he's actually waiting for a second Oracle, too. So that could be devastating economic damage.
Yeah. Ooh, And soO, I mean, what soO's doing looks like he expects a charge drop, a DT drop, some sort of ground-based play. No spores. He does have a 4th queen, I believe, starting up now. I think he's only got 3 queens out on the map. And,
that won't stop it, though. I mean, it'll do damage to him, but it's...
Yeah.
It's a dead couple of mineral lines, possibly.
If they go straight around the back to the natural, that's the money. I don't think there's a spore on the natural ready, and that's a big target. Only 1 queen there. The oracles are coming in. The overlord's going to see it. How quickly can soO react and get his drones out of there? Nice. Yeah, he's just going to go straight by.
The natural.
That's the target. He's going to dive in. He's looking for a good 7 or 8 kills minimum. Let's see what he finds.
Yeah, okay, that's the 7 or 8. There you go. Now, getting out of the oracles intact is also a big deal. Losing one would be okay. Obviously, all of them surviving like they just did is awesome. 11 drones dead.
That's
great. Big deal. And the other thing here, too, now this is the funniest part for Zerg as well. Oftentimes they'll be like, well, I lost that many drones. I'm not going to build spore crawlers because I can't afford to double down on that. But if you don't double down on that, when the shields regenerate, oracles show back up, you're going to lose more drones.
Oh, and that Zergling will patrol. Okay, the Overseer does end up seeing the Adepts. The Zergling, it only barely caught a glimpse, something which would have been very easy to miss. But now he does know those Adepts are coming, so he's not going to be able to surprise soO too much. Of course, no glaives on these Adepts. They're just adding a bit more of an issue, a bit more mobility for soO to deal with. The Roaches, though, in position, the Adepts are just going to dive for it.
Yeah. And I don't think they'll get that much done. You can see a little bit of a misfire there.
Mostly mining time.
A little bit of mining time opens some space for this. And if they get out, that's
another
really nice.
8 workers, though. This is stacking up like crazy. Another 11 workers. Oh, my lord. The Adepts finally go down. But Hurricane...
They won positioning. And those Adepts, they don't go to the mid-game, right? He's not going for glaives, not going for mass Adepts.
Exactly.
So losing 5 Adepts is okay, considering they paired with the Oracles there nicely.
I mean, I think it's so good, right? If you can just trade those out for workers, you kind of go, oh, if I get 2 workers for each Adept, that's great. And they enabled the Oracles to get a ton. Gonna come in one more time.
Wow.
You've got to keep that last Oracle alive, get it out of there, and this is a huge, huge win. And I'm sure there's some Protoss players out there going, but look, soO still has the same worker count. I mean, he's taken so much damage, though. If he can get the 3rd, that'll be big. What have we got? Is there an Immortal out? Yeah, what's on this wall? Okay, yeah, that's an easy defense there.
I'm loving this tech switch from soO, by the way. So last game, he shows Spire, and as Pig beautifully broke down, it was like 3 meters, kind of a fake, nothing really came out of it. This time around, there's a good chance it actually won't even get scouted, but even if it does, maybe it's the same thing again, where you're like, well, I don't think that's a real Spire, but then all of a sudden 12 mutas show up, and unless you actually start really making some Phoenix, they're going to do some pretty big damage. This is a late 3rd for all intents and purposes, and the army coming out from Hurricane is going to be like Sentry Immortal. It's not even going to be Archons, I don't think.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind soO kind of gambling on this a little bit as well, and saying, let's just go 6 gases and see what we can do, but still no spore in that main.
That's what I was talking about earlier, man.
Yeah, you cool.
And he'll never do it. Like, Zergs are like, no, I've lost drones. I'm making 0 defense, man. I promise you. Well, the other 25 drones are crying out in agony saying, please. But they won't. He never will. So there's the 6 mutas.
Yeah.
See if he stops there, if he makes more.
I mean, 6 mutas alone, not the biggest investment, but 5 mutas is what it takes to one-shot workers, right? So this gives you a little bit of breathing room on that. You lose 1 muta, you can still one-shot them. The Oracle comes in again and is like, whoa, okay, buddy. I am up to 16 kills, all of them workers, and I'm feeling pretty good about my existence. These mutas have a lot of damage they need to do on the other side of the map, because Hurricane, if he's left alone for another 2 minutes here, he's in an unstoppable position. These mutas are coming in just at the moment where they can disrupt Hurricane before he gets too far out of control. What's the defense like in that main base? Is there a cannon?
Nothing.
Nothing.
A lot of gateways. So he will be able to warp in the Stalkers, and because it's only 6 mutas...
Oh, he's pushing, though. The push will be good.
Get caught in a weird cycle, so there it is. So he will have the defense for it. You're going to lose probes, and they're going to jump around to the various different mineral lines, or at least have the option to do that. And that's
good reaction, though. It's only 6 mutas, right? If it was like 9 or 10, he could just kind of dive through, but the Phoenix there, the Stalker's the quick response. He's reinforcing on the front at the same time. And remember, he's going to even do the stasis trap this time. Beautifully queued up there. Freezes a bunch of those workers. And this is just so hard for soO to deal with. But there we go. Nice. Finding a little bit of more damage. It's a lot of Roach, Ravager, Queen. The force fields, they trap a few units up front. Not that many, though. Yeah, good pullback on the Zealots. You notice he wants the Zealots behind. He's going to, oh no, there we go. Extra wave of force fields. That's the money. The Immortals landing some big hits there. More sentries warping in. He's just going to try and bait those Roaches into coming too deep into his army.
The Zealots are just occupying space, and I love that you pointed this out, that he pulled them back, because they're really not damage dealers here. I can't even say that. Damage dealers here at all. It's all about those Immortals behind it and the Archons.
Oh, the Oracle's going to come up here as well. The infamous F2, and the Archons, the Immortals, the Sentries, the Force Fields running low.
Doing it, though.
soO has so much Roach Ravager. His ability to absorb damage in this early game and still make a gigantic army is astounding. But those 3 Immortals, the Archons in the back, they are dishing out the hurt. A drone pull into the Archon splash. Lots of drones going down. Now, there's not too much left here for Hurricane, but this is where that Prism Micro comes out in a big way. There we go, keeping those Immortals alive. The Roaches, the Ravagers, just a few of them left. This entire third has had its worker line eradicated. And these Zealots, they do actually do a lot of damage when it's down to this messy, scrappy engagement scenario.
I think that's the original 3 Immortals, and they did all the damage. The Zealots just, you know, it's like a citizen's arrest. They just get in their face and flail their arms, just saying, hey, look at me. That's going to be it. soO taps out, and we are all tied up going to game 3. Wow. I mean, obviously the MVP here that you look at is the Oracle, but it's obviously so much more than that, and it's so fun watching how these top players, the little decisions they make, right? Like, you go Spire, it goes completely unscouted. The mutas go all the way across the map. They're never seen. If it was like 12 or 15, he wins the fight against 3 Stalkers in a Phoenix. He depowers the gateways, and the game might just actually end kind of right there. They'd have to come back home or whatever. But the other part I want to talk about here too, Pig, and I'd love it for you to break this down because it's such a big deal. If you just A-move that army, if you take those Zealots, the Immortals, the Archons, the Sentries, Guardian Shield up, get your Force Field off, fine, but A-move into that fight, you lose in a big way. The Zealots die so cheaply there, and then there's no insulation for the Immortals and Archons, and I think that fight goes the other way completely. But because Hurricane did that so perfectly, this fight flips on its head. I think that's amazing.
It's so incredible to watch these top-level players with the way they utilize force fields in that army. Because I know, and I'm sure you've experienced it, when you try to do this push at home, your Zealots are off, just kind of 5 Zealots getting eradicated on their own by the Roaches, and the Zerg kind of splits your whole army into pieces, but he was able to consolidate using the force fields, the slow Immortals and Archons, letting the Roaches engage on them, and then the Zealots would come to the front. The force fields would lock them in place, and he was taking these series of mini efficient engagements. Nonetheless, an impressive ability to almost defend after a disastrous first few minutes of that game. Let's see how we go in game number 3.
I mean, also those 3 Immortals, though. They did all the damage. The Archons and Immortals, obviously, those are the 2 big ones, but the 3 Immortals, they just never got touched for the most part. They did all the work. But one of these 2 guys is about to qualify for that top 24. The winner of this next game right here on Cyber Forest will be your player. Lower right-hand side from Korea, it's the Blue Protoss Hurricane. These guys, they got me tripping all over my words, Pig. Do it.
And up here in the top left-hand side, the Zerg player, it's soO. Representing Chivo Esports. And, I mean, really, I wish soO would just teach me and the ability to lose like 25 drones in the first few minutes of a ZVP and then still somehow be ahead on supply and almost defend a brutal Immortal Archon timing attack. There's not a lot of players that can do that. soO, his ability to just kind of absorb crazy amounts of damage, to be such a powerful contender in the early mid-game stages, I feel like he just has a way of getting the job done, you know? He's so good. I am such a big fan of soO. The only thing I'm critical of is his ultra late game play, but he just doesn't let it get there very often. It's such a rare weakness that we see in his play.
Yep. And I think one of the funny things too is I very often watch these, mega top tier players for inspiration like the rest of us, but they actually make it look so easy and so like, well, of course I scouted that time and saw exactly what you're doing, and now I'm making this other counter tech. And then you're like, well, I'll just go home and do that in my own games. And you ladder and things are catching you off guard. You're doing what you thought was a counter, but that was a fake Spire. This game is so beautifully complex and so challenging that oftentimes we forget when we get to an event like Katowice and we're seeing just series after series of the best players, and they make the game look very simple.
The amount of hours, passion, dedication that goes into this, the amount of games these guys need to lose to get to this point is incredible. They've seen failure time and time again. And I guess, these are the 2 perfect players for that, right? soO, a player who is one of the absolute best players in the world, but he's almost always been stopped just short of the trophy in the 2nd place. Hurricane, a player who's been able to contest with these guys, practice with them at the top, but very rarely makes it past that sort of top 32 of the GSL. It is interesting to see, just how much passion there is for this game, how much skill they cultivate over the years. And here it is, Stargate once again. I feel like Hurricane's very European. in the way he plays, right? Like, he's like, I'm good at my macro, I'm confident in my defense, my standard play. He'll mix in a timing attack here or there, but he's very, I feel like there's less variability than a lot of the other Korean players have.
He's going to do it the StarCraft way, right? Like, if he's going to beat you, it was through not shenanigans per se, but more of a just like he outplayed you and outmaneuvered and executed. Very solid, straight-up player. soO, we'll see if he mixes things up. So far, it's been a mix-up of sorts, but it's involved a Spire, and it's involved a little bit of mind games off of that.
It's almost like a standard Spire, like that's part of his build, right? I wonder if this is something where he says, you know what, I've decided that this is just, it causes enough problems for the Protoss, even if I don't commit to it or I barely commit to it. I just like this as part of my play. We saw him go into Hydra Baneling off it.
Yes.
Of course, in that past game, it was just Mass Roach Ravager because he was reacting to the big attack that was coming across the map from Hurricane. So he's got some variability in how he follows this up.
I will say, selfishly speaking, my silent little soapbox that I died on many years ago is that Zerg should always make a Spire ZVP. I've been saying that since Wings of Liberty. Even if you don't intend to use it, the reaction from a Protoss is more severe than the cost of that Spire. Now, my old training partners and friends were like Hydra, so they would shout me down and say that the cost of Spire is astronomical and you could never make that if you don't intend to fully use it. I don't believe that to be fully true.
Not at all.
Anyways, but here we are.
I think it's something especially, for most people out there, these sort of things that are so scary. It's so scary. I mean, it's almost one of those things you see them coming through your base with the hallucinated Phoenix, and you run a drone over, you wave at the hallucination, and you put the Spire down in front of it, and you say, what do you think I'm going to do with this, buddy? And the Protoss can start to panic. But we're not going to get that far in this game, are we, Jeff?
No, I think if we look at the gases, there's a good chance they were pulled off, or at minimum in the main. Yep, they're actually fully pulled off, or lightly. None of the natural. 7 gateways going down. The Robo's going to finish. It's going to be a Warp Prism. Hurricane, and this is what we said. This is so good about him, right? We were talking about how he's just a straight-up player. Sometimes he hits timing attacks. That is his image. And sometimes soO in Game 3 here of a decider match could be like, you know what? I fully anticipate go up to 4 bases or tech here and be fine.
I love the fake of the third. He's making it look like he really wants to go to that third, and that's huge because that can prompt soO to build more drones. soO's up on 4 gases, which is what he needs. He needs a lot of roaches, but if he builds any more drones, he cannot defend the incoming attack. And look at that. Even lets him get the probe snipe. soO's like, haha, denied your base. Haha, yeah, you can't take that. But Hurricane has got the Warp Prism coming out. Has the Warp Prism being spotted on the south side? I don't think so.
Oh my God.
I don't think it's been seen. Roaches are starting up. Queens are starting up. soO has got to realize that something is going on right now, but these Zealots are going to hit so hard. That's 8 gateways of charge slots, and they're going to be just going straight into soO's face. He's got to get his Queens together. He's building a Nidus. He has no idea this is coming.
And that might be a nice little counterplay. The third is forfeit, it's gone, and in fact, if Hurricane wants to win this game, he's going to have to go over. The Prism is actually getting low in health. It doesn't quite die. The Zealots are going to get on top of the
Queen's going to pop in the third base. The Queen might pop out and be able to snipe that. Is she going to go for it? She's not going to. He's focused on the other engagement. And there we go. The Zealots up against the wall of Queens and Roaches. We've seen drones pulled to the natural as well, buffering. And soO just consolidating his defense on that natural and crushing the first wave of Zealots. That is the ability of soO to not even realize this push was coming until the last second and just destroy it.
I mean, a little bit of lady luck here, right? Like the Nidus, the Roaches at that time, that was signifying that he wanted to be the aggressor. It just so happens that those Roaches and that massive Queens, which he was intending to be offensive with, ends up being the perfect defense. Fantastic decision-making from soO. And you know what? People don't like to say it, but luck is involved in StarCraft. And you know what? soO got a little bit there.
Absolutely. He's now in an astronomical situation. A lot of players look at the work count, they say, but soO's only up a few workers. He's not in that great a position.
Oh, it's the
You've got to remember, this is not a Protoss player we're looking at. Hurricane, basically, when you think of Protoss, you think of Immortals, you think of Sentries, you think of Storm. Hurricane pulled every single worker off gas. He doesn't have any upgrades. He's got no tech units. He's like, I've got 1 Immortal, a Stalker, and a few Zealots. This is not what you expect from a Protoss player. In this scenario, soO could have less workers, way less workers. He'd still be ahead. He's got a lair, he's got roach speed, he's got 3 bases. At any moment, he can hold down the drone key. soO is in absolute control of this game.
And he's going to try to end it right now. It does get spotted here. The Zealots are on top of it pretty early on. Will it be enough? The transfuse has got to be immediate. And no, nothing comes out of it just there. A nice little trap here at the ramp too, and the Immortals behind those force fields are going to be able to trim down the Roach count. So this is the beginning of something, but I do have to go back to what Pig just said. There's so much more that needs to happen, right? Because he wasn't mining gas, his ability, like if you gifted him 7 sentries right now, I'd begin to be like Hurricane's in an okay spot. But he doesn't. He has no gas. He's using all the gas to get Immortals out. He's stuck on 2 bases. We're advanced in the game, so the bases are starting to get thin as well. What does he do? Push out to a 3rd with like 4 Immortals, but no stopping power, no sentries, nothing like that?
Yeah, the Contaminate to add insult to injury there on that Immortal. Oh, that's really frustrating. And that is going to block the only real power unit that Hurricane is building right now. Stasis Trap at the main does get a big hit. Little tidbit. The first time people realized this was the lowest APM way to use the Oracle to harass. I believe it might have been Stats who figured it out. Whoever it was against soO, Abyssal Reef, GSL game a couple of years ago. And we didn't see him react to a single one. It was like 16 stasis traps ruining his mining, and they kept swapping to the camera shot of soO, and he just looked like the angriest Zerg player you've ever seen, because it was the first time we really saw someone just doing mass stasis trap harassment. There was an Oracle behind each mineral line. Every 30 seconds like clockwork, they'd come in, freeze the entire worker line. Since then, we don't see it very often because the Zergs are very good at pulling back, activating it with a single drone, going back to mining. But
he actually could have killed that whole mineral line.
Well, at least a few of them, hey. So 170 supply versus 110. Do you think he can defend this 3rd, Jeff?
Don't believe so. And that's all the force fields right there, where he's got like 1 or 2 more. But it doesn't matter. That's Roach Ravager. They don't care about your force field. Some nice micro might delay the inevitable. You'll fall back into your natural. There will be no 3rd.
The Archon was stuck at all the units plugged behind it.
soO's like, nah, we're not going any further with this. I mean, maybe he can't go up to the high ground, but it'll actually just hit the production here and then find out there's a 3rd at worst for soO.
You know, soO, he's just so good. By the way, I love these skins. It's still so weird seeing Zerg die with like fire and explosions, like mechanical bits sparking and going everywhere. The Simulant Zerg skin still, shout out to whoever came up with this idea at Blizzard. It is just the best skin set out there. My absolute fave.
And they make sounds too. They make different sounds as well.
I love Nathaniel's little tidbit he likes to share about the Disclaw drones. They chop up units rather than just taking them out with the normal animation. And these Immortals going down here. A heroic hold from Hurricane, and not a bad series from him. You know, a lot of people, I mentioned it earlier, when people see players fall to soO, they think, oh, look, he just got crushed. That's soO's ability. He can do it. He just shuts down his opponents. He's such a decisive player.
Would you say confident. That's his superpower?
That's right, Jeff. Yeah! I didn't realize we got Fear Dragon in here. But,
well, one for him. Much love to our brother out there. But yep, that's going to mean that Mr. Hurricane here has got at least, it's 1 more match, right? Does he drop down to the cider of the...
Yeah, so he's going to go down to the lower bracket there and face off, of course. The lower bracket is... you've been pushed into the kind of staked pit. Yeah, there's like a bunch of people fighting, just bare knuckle for their lives down there.
No, he's got 2 more matches, doesn't he, when you lose that one?
Yeah, I do believe so. It's really tough. So we are going to, of course, be right back, guys, with more Intel Extreme Masters action in just a sec.